What's wrong with being confident?
The Art of Improvement with Giovanni Marotta. I'm Karen Klaus. Hi, Giovanni.
Hello, Karen.
Well, you know what? You have so many businesses, I can barely keep up with them. Kitchen Designs by Giovanni, of course. Precision Windows.
And River City Rock Tops.
River City Rock Tops. You know, you're always talking about improving your life and improving your businesses or even just getting on the path to success. And I always wonder, how did you get to this point? How did it all start? Because everybody always looks at people that have successful businesses and say, their dad gave it to them or they just accidentally hopped into it. But how did it all start?
So my dad did not give it to me.
Okay, I get it. That's a good start. I feel better.
Yeah, so it started back I was in the Marine Corps when I got out of high school. So I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years.
Do you mind if I stop you already?
Yes.
In high school, what did you think your job was going to be? Let's go back a little bit further.
Well, I didn't know what I was going to be, but all those crazy tests that you take in high school to say what you're good at, it always said I would be good at construction.
Really?
Yeah.
And what did you think when you saw that?
I thought, I don't want to dig ditches. That's really what I thought.
That's a lot of hard work.
I'm not going to dig ditches. So I took those tests and it always said that. And I'm like, oh, that really sucks. I got to figure something else out.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to the Marine Corps. I tell everyone, people ask me, why'd you go to the Marine Corps? Well, I always wanted to go to the Marine Corps, but I kind of saw my brother's friends, which was older than me. They would go and finish high school. Then they'd go to a community college or a university, and they would drop out after a year or two. So I always said I was smart enough to know that I was too dumb to go to college. My wife will hate me for saying that.
I have to write that down.
Yeah, I was smart enough to know I was too dumb to go to college. I wasn't great at school. I was a horrible student. I don't really think I graduated from high school, although I got a diploma. They just kind of forced me out.
Yeah,
I was horrible.
I think that's happened to several people
right.
in life.
So I didn't want to be like my brother's friends. I wanted to go to the Marine Corps to try to do something different.
And so do you think it was the right decision?
I think it was. I only wanted to do 4 years. People always ask me, why didn't I do longer? It's like, because if you know me and you know the Marine Corps, it's like, I got in a lot of trouble.
Well, you can't be a free thinker. That's for sure.
You can't be a free thinker. So I was great in the field when we were out training. And then we'd come back to garrison, and I would get in trouble. So we would just do stupid stuff. I was a radio operator, so when you come back to the rear, to garrison, and you go to work, there's nothing to do. There's no radio communications to do, so you clean radios and have meetings. So being 19 years old, we just did stupid stuff to get in trouble. Like
this is not the job I signed up for.
We would take the Humvee out in the back on
Okay.
Camp Pendleton and just do crazy stuff. So
You're just nothing but bad.
yeah, so they sent me to the field because I did good in the field, like training, like 7 months out of the year. So they'd always get me out because I was in trouble when I came back.
Well, I mean, okay, so you're in the Marines, and you had to have learned something from the Marines, obviously.
I thought the Marines was great for me because it gave me probably the biggest is a lot of persistence and not giving up and kind of the mental strength.
Do you
I don't
feel
think I had that.
you didn't have that before?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe I did a little bit to a degree, but I think I really got it when I was in the Marine Corps. It gave me something a lot different as far as my mindset.
So you said you were in for only 4 years. What made you make that decision?
I knew I wasn't going to be in more than that because it's very regimented. There's no thinking outside the box usually. It's pretty much this is the way we've done it for the last 220 years.
So in year 3, you had your plan for what you were going to do.
Yeah, well...
When you got out.
No.
Oh.
So...
Okay.
No, I didn't really have much of a plan. I got out and I was in San Diego. I got a job. I had met, being in the Marine Corps and going to church on the weekends and stuff, I had met a businessman named Rich Proshold, and Rich was a great mentor to me at the time, and he'd introduced me to a lot of people. But he was a guy that always told me, I'll give you a lot of advice, I'll help you out as much as I can, but never ask me for money. And so when I got out of the Marine Corps, him and his wife, Maxine, they told me, you can come and live with us for 90 days, 3 months. And you come live with us for 90 days for your transitioning back to being a civilian. So I lived with them for 3 months.
Wait a second. How did you meet him? And you just went to some stranger's house and said,
No,
"I'll go live with you."
It was a church. I met him in church, and we just
Okay.
became
Okay.
friends. And I was in my early 20s, and he was, I think, about 54 at the time.
So he was your a mentor.
Right. So he said, "You can stay with me for 3 months. We'll pay for your food. We'll just don't pay rent, get a job, but you have 90 days. And day 91, you're out. No exception."
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job, and I think that job was at Terminex. So
How did
Work-
you decide to terminate?
it's just,
Yeah,
I
you
need
just found a job. Uh-huh.
I can do something.
Right.
And then I was hired by a motivational speaker to do some sales, some inside sales for motivational
How
speaking.
did that happen?
I knew someone. I knew one of the
Okay.
vice presidents from church. So
Okay,
I worked
okay.
for them. And then I thought, after the motivational speaker he would speak on all over the country on how to build your business. So then I woke up one day and thought, you know what? I can do that myself. It's not that hard. I mean, he talks about it all the time. It sounds so easy. So I was making really good money because this job was paying really good in California. I lived in a 3-bedroom condo, and I was doing really good. And then I decided to quit.
Well, wait a second here. Why did you decide to do that? Because everything was so good.
Everything was good, and I thought, well, they talk about it all the time. The dot-com boom was going, and I was like, I can do this.
I can do bigger.
And it didn't really work out for me.
Yeah.
So during that time, I had 6 companies before the 7th one, which was a success. So 6 companies, they all had failed. In the middle of that, my 3-bedroom condo went to a 2-bedroom, to a 1-bedroom, and then I ended up living in the ghetto. Like when I said the ghetto, it was a fenced-in apartment complex.
Oh yeah.
It was a fenced-in, and they kept the fence like it was gated.
Uh-huh.
You know, you needed a code to get in,
Yeah.
but it was really to keep everyone in, not to let anyone.
To keep the neighborhood safe.
Yes, to keep 'em to keep us all in. It was really bad. So I lived in this ghetto apartment. It was really bad. It was a 3-bedroom, and there were 6 of us,
Oh my
bunk
gosh.
beds.
Yeah.
And what was even worse is everyone went out to work, and I had a roommate in my room on these bunk beds, and I had a little computer desk, and that was my work because I was trying to do my own company.
Sounds like a prison.
Yeah, and I would go in there and just type away and work and try to do what I was doing. These crazy companies that I thought about, and none of them worked.
You have to have a different attitude, though, when you're in a situation like that. And hello, I know I've been in that situation, but you have to have an attitude because when you reach that point, it's pretty darn hard to go back up.
Yeah.
If you don't watch yourself, you can just go down, down, down into
was-
the pool.
It was bad. It was really bad. I was so broke. 6 guys we were living with. It was a madhouse. The apartment complex was so bad at night, I would get woken up by noise because I'm dead serious. People were fighting. I could look at my window and fights out in the parking lot. And also, one of the other things that happened was twice SWAT showed up to my apartment complex. Not on my building, but like the building across. And I like walked outside, and on the loudspeaker, they're like, get back in your house.
You're like,
so
this
SWAT
is
showed
not
up.
a good scene. I don't want to
Yeah.
be here.
So Rich Proshold had introduced me to a businessman named Fletcher Anderson. And Fletcher had made millions of dollars and a very successful businessman, lived in this huge mansion over in San Diego County, in North County actually, and 7 miles away from the ocean that you can see the ocean from his house.
Mm.
He introduced me to Fletcher. I had 3 meetings with Fletcher. And I just really connected with him. And all Rich did was really introduce me. He said, you need to meet this guy. So after a few meetings, Fletcher said, you know, I think you should come live at my house. And now that's kind of a stranger. I've only met him 3 times.
That is strange.
It's very odd. And he's like, here's the deal. What do you want to do in life? And I was like, didn't really have that.
I want to live in this house and look at that ocean.
I just need to get out of the ghetto, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
he told me, he's like, I want you to move in with me, and you are going. He travels a lot, so he's like, when I travel with my wife, there's no one to take care of my house. So you take care of my house. You start a company. I'll help you. I'll show you, and I'll teach you everything about business. The only thing is, the only way you make money is if your company that you start and I'll help you with makes money. I'm not paying you anything.
Hmm.
So
What was the business, by the way?
oh gosh, it's so embarrassing. Let's see. I've bought debt collections from companies. I have had internet companies. I've just a lot of internet ones. They're just so bad. It's embarrassing.
Well, you
selling
you
stuff
must
on
have
the-
learned something, right?
selling stuff on the internet, and so Fletcher, he gave me this offer, and I'm like, okay, I live in the ghetto, or I can go live in this mansion.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and lived in this mansion, had no money, made no money. If I wanted to go somewhere, I had to literally go ask him, like, hey, can I get like $20? And so the deal was he would teach me everything. And so he would travel. I'd take care of the house. I could drive all of his cars, which is kind of
Oh
funny
my
because he has these
gosh.
cars and I can drive them, but I have no money.
Right.
I could put gas in them. There's food at the house. And so if I wanted to go out, it was
All
I'd
a
have, to,
facade.
I'd have to ask him
right.
if I can get some money. And bringing someone home was kind of just weird. That was weird.
You felt like a big liar.
That
This is
was
not my
just,
house, not my car, not my kitchen, not
That-
my anything.
That was very odd. So Fletcher taught me for a year before I moved back to San Antonio. And really in that time, I was like, didn't know if I really learned anything. I thought it was very interesting. It was fun. And I would travel sometimes with them. We went to Vegas a lot because we did a lot of business dealings over there. So I would go over to Vegas and do work with them over there. So it was fun. But then after 1 year, I went back to San Antonio, and I could not say at that time that I learned a whole lot. I wasn't really sure about that. And then I started another company in San Antonio,
Okay.
which was actually
Which-
in, gosh, that was so bad, was in remodeling,
Mm-hmm.
which I had never done. But when I moved to San Antonio, once I got established, I started, that was a debt collecting company. That one went down. Then I started in remodeling. And when I started remodeling, it was in 2002, I believe, around 2002. I started just doing anything. I had never done remodeling
I was
before.
just about to ask you, where did you get the background in remodeling? How did that even
I
happen?
didn't have one.
And so,
But the test told me I was good at it in school, remember?
okay.
So I was like, yeah,
You're
sure.
hired.
So what I would do is I'd make these flyers, and I'd go put them on 100 doors. And so for every 100 doors I'd put them on, I'd get 2 calls, and I'd sell at least 1. So the first month, I sold like 20 grand
Nice.
and got deposits. And so I got,
Nice.
because they were wanting to foreclose on my house and wanted to repo my car, so I was hiding it. It was really bad. So I finally got deposits so I can actually get all that stuff caught up. And so I was like, okay, so I need to go do a tile floor, or someone's calling me about a tile floor. So what I would do is I would go to Home Depot. This is before like YouTube and everything. So kind of understand, like, no one's really big on YouTube, not a whole lot on the internet. So I would go to Home Depot, and they have a do-it-yourself section.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And they have all these books. The books are $35, just in case you're wondering. $35. I didn't have $35. I was broke. So I would take the book, I would go to the back of the store, and I would sit in the back corner, and I would read about tile. And I would read about roofs, and I'd read about concrete, and I'd read about patio covers. Whatever someone called me about, I would actually go and read about and get an understanding of it. So when I went to the appointment, I knew how to sell it.
Amazing.
And then after that, I would sub it out, and some of the work I did myself and just kind of self-taught myself. So I started doing that, and it actually started going really good in San Antonio. But the problem was I ran into like 1 month where I lost like 6 grand.
Ugh.
I did concrete, and the concrete forms broke in the backyard, and concrete went everywhere in this guy's backyard.
Is that when you ask God, why?
I was depressed.
Why are you doing this to
It
me?
was so bad. And then I did a roof, and this is like all the same month. I did a roof, and the guy, one of the workers fell off the roof. That was
Oh
really
my
bad.
Gosh.
And the roof was open, and it started raining. So that was a really bad month. I lost like 6 grand, and I was depressed. So
I'm getting depressed just thinking
I
about it.
know.
What made you keep going on?
well, I didn't. At that point, I was offered a job from someone in my neighborhood to be a countertop installer. And I was like, man, do I get a salary?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but we're starting up in Nashville, so you need to move to Nashville, and the company will pay for you to go. And I was like, well, I've never actually installed a countertop before, right? And so like, we'll train you. And so it was working for Cosentino, the maker of Silestone. And I was like, okay, you'll train me? So we went to this training, and actually to people's houses, and for 2 weeks. And the guys that were training me were so bad, we never installed the countertop right the first time. It was so bad.
Oh my gosh.
It was really bad.
You're like, how did this ever make it?
So I just closed down shop. I was like, I'm going to go work for a company for the rest of my life. 6 companies, gone bad. I'm tired. I'm not made out for starting my own company. It's just not in me. And so I quit. And I went and worked for Cosentino. They actually moved me to Nashville. And I was working in Nashville as an installer and became really good at installing. And we would install for Home Depots and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was living in Nashville. And when I got there, the general manager was there, myself, and one other installer named Ron Davis, who had never installed a countertop before in his life also. So the GM was complaining about the new accounting and CRM software that they have for Cosentino. Their headquarters was in Houston at that time, and we were in Nashville, and he had to reconcile everything with Houston. But Navision, this new program that they got, was complicated. And when I walked in and he was complaining about it, I was like, I know that program. Because back when I was with the motivational speaker, they used Navision, so I was trained on it.
Oh, my gosh.
So he's like, okay, so after you install, you can come and actually work in here to do the accounts payable, receivable, and payroll. And you reconcile with corporate. I'm like, okay, I mean, I'll do it. So I would always do all the reconciling and reports. And so when I did a report, I would put on the bottom of it, prepared by Giovanni Marotta. So this went on for a year, and I'd always send him up to corporate. So one day, a vice president named Brandon Calvo that I never even met at the time, didn't know I knew who he was, but I never met him. He called me on my cell phone, and the general manager told me that day that he wanted to talk to me. I'm like, gosh, what did I do?
I'm going to have to start looking for another job again.
I'm not that bad of an installer, am I? So he called me up, and he asked me, why are you doing these reports? I'm like, because no one else knows how to use the software, so I just do them. He's like, where'd you learn it from? And so I told him. And he's like, I want you to fly to Houston and talk to me. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, I think we have some opportunities for you. He's like, call my assistant and get on a plane and come over here. So I did, and I went over there to Houston, and I talked with him, and they had a lot of different opportunities that they were needing help with because they had the big Home Depot account, and they had holes all over the country where they weren't having very good installers, or they didn't have any installers. So he pulled me in, and he's like, I think you would be a good trainer for people to install because we need help teaching people. And I'm like, okay. And then so he offered me that job, and then that fell through because the CEO gave it to someone else or something. I don't know. It was kind of weird. And so I was like, okay, so I'm not doing that. I guess I'll just be an installer. And he's like, no. He's like, why don't you start your own company? And I was like, no, that's
I've learned my lesson on that one.
And I told him, I was like, man, I've done that before. I'm just not good at it. I had 6 companies, and they all failed. I'm horrible. The one that I thought was going to go kind of ended up losing money one month, and I'm just not good at it. And so I'm not going to do it. And he's like, well, I think you should. And I was like, no, I'm just going to work for you for the rest of my life. I'm going to get my paycheck.
Keep it safe.
And I'll be good. And he's like, well, I think you really should look at an opportunity to have an installation company. And I said, okay, so here's the deal. I don't have a truck. I have a car. I have a truck. Or you have a truck. I have a car. The truck I use to install today is the company truck. I don't have any tools because it's company tools. I don't have any money because I don't get paid very good here. Right? So there's no way I can start a company. And so he's like, well, I think we can work with you and help you out. And so he asked me, what would you need? What would it take for you to start a company? And me mouthing off, I said, if you give me $25,000, I'll do it. And he stuck out his hand. He said, deal. And I was like, deal? Like, for real? 25,000? And he's like, yeah. He's like, that's what you need to start? I picked a random number. Like, I figured he's not going to give me 25 grand, right? That's a lot of money. And I was like, okay.
Oh, no.
I was like, what do I need to do?
Where do I need to get slapped?
And he's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, but I'm not very good at this, right? Because I've had 6 companies. And he said, here's different areas in the country and that we need help in. And so I asked him, tell me what the worst area is. Where do you have the biggest problems at? It's the worst for your product. And he said, Cleveland. And I said, I'll go to Cleveland.
Oh, my gosh.
And I'd never been to Cleveland in my life. I never lived anywhere where it snowed. But I was like, there's got to be a nice place to live somewhere over there. So he's like, okay, I want you to go back and resign.
And you actually did it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I went back and resigned, and he said, you're going to go to Cleveland. And they had a fabrication facility where they cut the stone in Detroit. So I was to fly into there. And he's like, get a plane ticket, fly into there. And when you go into there, you'll meet with the general manager. And
I don't want to cut you off,
okay.
but I'm cutting you off.
Okay.
You know why?
Why?
Because this is the cliffhanger. This
Okay.
is the cliffhanger. After these messages, we're going to find out what happened to Giovanni. But seriously, we have to have a part 2 on this, because this is an amazing journey that you've taken. And anybody that walks into your showroom now must just, I mean, they've got to be in awe because of the beauty and the professional installation that you do and the design. And this story in itself makes me kind of laugh, but kind of be afraid.
And kind of cry.
What? So I want to hear part 2, okay? You got to tell me all about what happened in Cleveland and what brought you to today.
Okay, so we'll talk about how I get to Cleveland, the disaster Cleveland started out to be.
What's next?
And how I got to where I'm at. We'll talk about that on the next show.
The Art of Improvement with Giovanni Marotta.